The restaurant owner heard the waitress speak 9 languages, and it changed everything. Samantha Johnson was picking up the shattered porcelain pieces scattered across the floor when she felt Robert Miller's sharp gaze piercing her back. The owner of Southern Spice took a deep breath, clearly holding back the anger threatening to explode at any moment. "Again, Samantha?" His voice was low but laced with irritation she knew all too well. "Third broken plate this week." She lowered her head, carefully gathering the shards to avoid cutting herself. At 42, Samantha had learned it was better to accept criticism in silence than to try explaining herself. After 3 years working at the restaurant in New York's Chinatown, she knew exactly how Robert reacted when crossed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. It won't happen again," she murmured without looking up. "It better not, because next time you're paying for that plate out of your own pocket," he retorted, turning his back and walking toward the counter. Samantha's face burned with shame. The other staff averted their eyes, pretending to be busy with their tasks. It was always like this. Robert Miller had a gift for humiliating people in public, especially her, his favorite target. Southern Spice sat on a bustling street connecting different ethnic communities in the neighborhood. During the day, it drew a diverse crowd. Americans, Japanese, Chinese, Koreans, as well as tourists and immigrants from various countries living in the area. Robert always boasted about running an international restaurant, yet he treated his employees as disposable. Samantha finished cleaning the floor and returned to the counter to pick up the next orders. Her co-worker, Margaret, a 55-year-old waitress who'd been there longer, discreetly approached. "Don't mind him, Sam. You know how Robert is. Tomorrow he won't even remember this," she whispered, trying to comfort her. "I know, Margaret. I'm used to it," Samantha forced a smile. But inside she carried the weight of yet another humiliating day. The lunch rush was just beginning when an elderly woman entered the restaurant. She appeared to be in her 70s, her grey hair tied in an elegant bun, dressed in simple but well-kept clothes. She carried a small travel bag and looked around with a confused expression. Samantha approached with a genuine smile, the same she offered every customer, no matter how she'd been treated moments before. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" The woman looked at her gratefully, but when she tried to speak, the words came out in a language Samantha immediately recognized as Mandarin. The customer was visibly nervous, gesturing and pointing to her bag, trying to explain something urgent. Robert, watching from the kitchen, rolled his eyes. "Samantha, don't waste time there. If she doesn't speak English, tell her to find another place." But Samantha didn't move. Instead, something inside her clicked, as if a long-locked door suddenly swung open. She leaned toward the woman and replied in fluent Mandarin, "Are you feeling all right? Do you need help?" The relief on the elderly woman's face was instant. She quickly explained that she had chest pains and needed her medicine from the bag, but the lock had jammed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now back to the story. The entire restaurant froze. Customers, staff, and Robert stood in absolute silence, watching Samantha converse fluently in Mandarin with the woman. Margaret dropped the plate she was holding, but this time no one cared about the sound of shattering porcelain. Robert stepped out of the kitchen as if he'd seen a ghost. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open. The waitress he humiliated daily, the one he considered incompetent and careless, was speaking one of the hardest languages in the world perfectly. Samantha helped the woman sit down and went to fetch a small screwdriver she found in the counter drawer. Carefully, she managed to open the stuck lock on the suitcase. The elderly woman took out a small bottle of medicine, swallowed a pill, and took a deep breath, clearly relieved. "Thank you so much, my dear. You saved my life," the woman said, this time in English with a hint of a Mandarin accent. "It was nothing, Mrs. Samantha hesitated. "Li Mei. My name is Li Mei. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, but when I get nervous, I forget my English." Samantha smiled, still holding the woman's hand to reassure her. That's when she noticed other restaurant customers had gathered around. A man of Middle Eastern appearance addressed her in French, asking if the woman was okay. Without thinking, Samantha replied in fluent French. A family of Russian tourists seated at the corner table overheard and approached to offer help. Samantha reassured them in perfect Russian. A German couple who had just entered the restaurant also joined the group, and she explained the situation in flawless German. Within minutes, the area around Mrs. Li Mei's table had turned into a small international conference. Samantha switched between languages with astonishing ease: Japanese with a businessman from Tokyo, Italian with a tourist from Rome, Hindi with an Indian family, and Arabic with a college student. Robert was petrified. Margaret and the other staff stared at Samantha as if she were a completely different person. The timid, submissive waitress they knew had vanished, replaced by a confident, eloquent, and clearly well-educated woman. How do you... Robert stammered, struggling to process what he'd just witnessed. Samantha realized she'd exposed herself. Panic tightened her chest. For 3 years, she'd kept her past a secret, working only as an ordinary waitress. But now, in a moment of impulse to help someone, she'd revealed skills she'd rather have kept hidden. "I need to get back to work," she said quickly, trying to step away. But Robert caught her arm, not forcefully, but with a firmness that made it clear she wasn't leaving without an explanation. "No, Samantha. You're not just going back to work like nothing happened. How do you speak all these languages?" Mrs. Li Mei, now recovered and sensing the tension, quietly stood and went to the register to pay her bill. The other customers, picking up on the heavy atmosphere, began to disperse, though many still watched with curiosity. Samantha took a deep breath. She knew there was no escaping now. For years, she'd carefully built a facade of simplicity, but now she felt like an actress who'd forgotten her role. "I learned when I was younger," she said vaguely, hoping the answer would be enough. "When you were younger?" Robert let out a bitter laugh. "Samantha, you don't just learn 9 languages when you're younger. You spoke Mandarin, French, Russian, German, Japanese, Italian, Hindi, Arabic, and English like a native in all of them. That's not something you pick up at some corner school." Margaret stepped closer, curious but with a kinder expression. "Sam, we've worked together for 3 years. How did you never tell anyone about this?" Samantha felt tears forming in her eyes. The moment she'd feared for so long had finally arrived. The questions she didn't want to answer, the past she had tried to leave behind, it was all coming to the surface. "Because I didn't want anyone to know," she said quietly. "I just wanted to work in peace." Robert shook his head in disbelief. "Work in peace? Samantha, you have extraordinary talent. Why on earth would you be working as a waitress when you could be making a fortune as a translator or interpreter?" The question hit Samantha like a punch to the gut. This was exactly what she didn't want to explain. Why would a woman with her qualifications choose to wait tables in a neighborhood restaurant, enduring daily humiliations from a rude boss? "Things aren't that simple," she murmured. "Not simple." Robert was growing irritated. "Samantha, I have tourists from different countries coming here every day. I lose business deals because I can't communicate properly. And you were here the whole time pretending you didn't speak other languages." "I never pretended anything," she shot back, raising her voice to Robert for the first time. "You never asked. In 3 years you never showed interest in anything about me except complaining about my work." The restaurant fell completely silent. Even the customers stopped eating to watch the argument. Margaret tried to intervene. "Hey, let's talk about this calmly. There are customers here." "No, Margaret," Robert interrupted. "This needs to be cleared up now. Samantha, you've deceived me all these years." "I didn't deceive anyone." Tears finally began to stream down Samantha's face. "I came here asking only for a job opportunity. You hired me to be a waitress, and that's what I've been. A good waitress." "A good waitress who breaks 3 plates a week," Robert retorted sarcastically. "I break plates because I'm always nervous," she exploded. "Because you treat me like I'm stupid. Because every day you find something to complain about, even when I do everything right." Robert was momentarily speechless. He had never seen Samantha defend herself with such vehemence. For 3 years she had always accepted his criticisms in silence. I didn't know you felt this way," he said more quietly. "Of course you didn't. Because to you I'm just the waitress you can humiliate when you're in a bad mood." The silence that followed was heavy and awkward. Some customers began to leave, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Margaret and the other staff didn't know where to look. Robert ran a hand through his hair, processing everything that had happened. In less than 30 minutes, his perception of Samantha had been completely shattered and rebuilt. The woman he saw as a mediocre employee was, in fact, someone with extraordinary skills. "Samantha," he finally said, with more respect in his tone, "I need to know the truth. What's your background? Where did you learn all these languages?" She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. "I studied international relations at Columbia University. I did exchange programs in 8 different countries. I worked as a translator and interpreter for 15 years. I spoke at international conferences, translated for diplomats, business people." Her voice faltered for a moment, until everything fell apart. Robert felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. Samantha wasn't just competent, she'd had a prestigious career he could never have imagined. "What happened?" Margaret asked with genuine concern. Samantha glanced around the restaurant. The few remaining customers were clearly listening. She couldn't share the whole truth here in front of strangers. Some wounds were too deep to expose publicly. "There was a misunderstanding at my job. I lost important contracts, and my reputation was ruined. I had to start over from scratch," she said, keeping to the brief and less painful version of the story. Robert knew there was much more behind that vague explanation, but he sensed it wasn't the time to push. Samantha had already revealed more than she intended, and he could see in her eyes that talking about it was extremely difficult for her. "Samantha, he began, but didn't know how to continue. How could he apologize for 3 years of inadequate treatment? How could he explain he'd never imagined he was dealing with someone so qualified? "I need to get back to work," she said, trying to end the conversation. "Mrs. Lee May must be waiting for her lunch." "No," Robert said firmly. "You're not going back to working as a waitress, not after what I saw today." Samantha felt a chill in her stomach. Was he about to fire her? "I'm promoting you. I want you to be my international customer service manager. We're going to turn this place into the first truly multilingual restaurant in the neighborhood." The proposal caught Samantha completely off guard. On one hand, it was a chance to use her skills again. On the other, it meant exposing herself more. And exposure was exactly what she'd spent years trying to avoid. "I need to think about it," she said hesitantly. "There's nothing to think about." Robert was excited, already envisioning the possibilities. "Samantha, you'll triple our international clientele. We can partner with hotels, travel agencies." "I said, I need to think," she interrupted more firmly. Robert realized he was being overbearing. His enthusiasm had made him forget that Samantha clearly had personal issues tied to using her language skills. "All right, take your time. But Samantha, it'd be a waste for you to keep working as an ordinary waitress when you have a talent like this." She nodded silently and went back to work. But now everything had changed. The other staff watched her with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Customers who had witnessed the scene whispered among themselves, and Robert couldn't take his eyes off her, as if seeing a completely new person. The rest of the day passed in an odd atmosphere. Samantha served tables efficiently, but Robert noticed details he'd missed before. Her elegant posture, her polite way of speaking, small gestures that revealed refined upbringing. How had he been so blind? At closing time, when the last customers left and the staff began cleaning, Robert approached Samantha. "Can we talk? In private?" She hesitated but nodded. They went to the small office at the back of the restaurant. Robert closed the door and gestured for her to sit. "Samantha, first I want to apologize for the 3 years of... well, you know how I treated you." She stayed silent, waiting. "Second, I need to understand something. If you have all this education, all these skills, why did you come work here? And why didn't you say anything when I didn't treat you well?" Samantha took a deep breath. She knew this conversation was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. "Robert, have you ever lost everything in life? Not just a job or money, but people's trust, your reputation, your credibility?" He shook his head. "When that happens, you learn it's better not to draw attention, better to be invisible. Do your work quietly. Give people no reason to dig into your life. But that doesn't make sense. With your qualifications, my qualifications became a problem, not an advantage, she cut in. In the world of translation and interpretation, reputation is everything. Once you lose clients' trust, it doesn't matter how many languages you speak or how many degrees you have. Robert began to understand that there was a much more complex and painful story behind Samantha's presence in his restaurant. What really happened? Samantha stayed silent for a long moment, debating internally whether she should tell the truth or stick to the simplified version she had given earlier. I made a mistake, a serious one during a very important translation. People lost a lot of money because of me. Contracts were cancelled, businesses were ruined. Her voice was almost a whisper. It wasn't intentional, but that didn't matter. Within a week, I lost all my clients. No one wanted to hire me anymore. But how long ago was that? 4 years. And since then you haven't tried to go back? I tried the first year, but the industry is small. Everyone knows each other. Every time I applied for a position, someone would bring up the story of my mistake. After a while, I gave up. Robert felt a weight in his chest. For 3 years, he had treated a woman poorly, who was already dealing with the pain of seeing her career crumble. Samantha, everyone makes mistakes. That doesn't define who you are forever. It does, Robert. At least in my old world it did. So I decided I needed a new world, where no one knew who I was or what had happened. And that's why you took the job here. Exactly. You offered me a simple job without asking about my past. It was exactly what I needed. Robert stayed silent, processing everything he had heard. He was beginning to understand why Samantha had endured his criticism and humiliation without fighting back. She was grateful for the job, even if it came with mistreatment. And now? After what happened today, do you think you can still keep this a secret? Samantha laughed bitterly. I doubt it. By now, half the neighborhood probably knows the waitress at Southern Spice speaks 9 languages. Then maybe it's time to stop hiding. It's not that simple, Robert. It's not just about deciding to stop hiding. There are consequences you don't understand. What kind of consequences? Samantha stood up from the chair, signaling the conversation was over. Consequences I'd rather not discuss. Can I go home now? It's been a tough day. Robert nodded, realizing he had touched wounds that hadn't yet healed. Of course. But Samantha, the promotion offer still stands. Think about it carefully. She nodded and left the office, leaving Robert alone with his thoughts. He knew there was much more to Samantha's story than she had shared, and that only deepened his curiosity and, surprisingly, his admiration for her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Samantha arrived at work nearly an hour late, something completely out of character for her. Robert immediately noticed she looked like she hadn't slept well. Her eyes were swollen and she avoided eye contact with everyone. Good morning, Samantha, Robert said, trying to sound casual. Everything all right? Good morning, Mr. Miller. Sorry I'm late, it won't happen again. She grabbed her apron and tried to head to the dining area, but Robert stopped her. Samantha, are you okay? You seem... I'm fine, she answered too quickly. Just didn't sleep well. Margaret, who was setting up the tables, approached with a smile. Sam, after you left yesterday, we couldn't stop talking about your languages. We still can't believe it. Why didn't you ever tell us? Samantha felt her stomach tighten. This was exactly what she had feared. Now it would be the topic of the day, maybe the week. Everyone would want details, ask questions, understand how she had acquired her skills. There's not much to tell, Margaret. It happened, and that's that. Samantha's tone made it clear she didn't want to continue the subject, but Margaret, in her innocence, missed the cue. Just imagine, Robert. Sam could help all those tourists who always come here lost. Remember that French couple last week who spent half an hour trying to explain what they wanted? Exactly, Robert perked up. Samantha, we can start small. How about you just help with the foreign customers who come in? No pressure, only when needed. Samantha sighed. She knew it would be hard to escape this situation now that her secret was out. Maybe it was better to accept it gradually than to create more tension. Fine, but only when it's really necessary. Robert smiled, seeing this as a small victory. He had no idea Samantha had spent the whole night thinking about quitting her job and moving to another city. The day started normally, but around 11 in the morning, an unexpected situation changed everything again. A group of 5 people walked into the restaurant, chatting animatedly in French. Robert immediately looked at Samantha. "I think your first opportunity has arrived," he said with a grin. Samantha approached the table and greeted the group in French. They were tourists from Boston visiting New York and had heard about the restaurant through a hotel recommendation. "Hello, I'm Samantha. How can I help you today?" she said naturally. The group reacted with joy and relief. They began asking about typical dishes, ingredients, and even other places to visit in the city. Samantha answered everything fluently and warmly, and Robert watched in fascination. What started as simple service turned into a conversation lasting nearly an hour. The French visitors were delighted not just with the food, but with the chance to speak in their native language. They insisted on taking photos with Samantha and promised to recommend the restaurant to their fellow countrymen. When the group left, other customers in the restaurant spontaneously applauded. Robert was beaming. "Samantha, that was extraordinary. They ordered twice as much as a group that size normally would." She forced a smile, but inside she was conflicted. On one hand, it had felt good to use her skills again and see the customers' joy. On the other, she felt pushed back into a world she had chosen to leave. "It was just one service, Robert. Don't exaggerate." "I'm not exaggerating. You saw how comfortable they were once they realized they could speak French. That completely changes their experience." Margaret approached just as excited. "Sam, you have to tell us how you learned French like that. You sound just like a native speaker." Before Samantha could answer, the restaurant door opened and an elegant woman in her 60s walked in. She looked around carefully as if searching for someone specific. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her clothes, though simple, had a touch of sophistication. The woman went straight to the counter where Robert stood. "Excuse me, are you the owner?" "Yes, I'm Robert Miller. How can I help you?" "My name is Catherine Williams. I'm looking for one of your employees, a young woman who helped a Chinese lady here at the restaurant yesterday." Robert immediately glanced at Samantha, who had stopped what she was doing upon hearing the conversation. "Are you talking about Samantha?" Robert pointed in her direction. Catherine followed his gaze and her face lit up when she saw Samantha. "Ah, perfect," she said, walking directly toward her. "Miss, could I talk to you for a moment?" Samantha felt a chill. The woman had spoken in French, and there was something in her tone that suggested this was no casual conversation. "Of course, ma'am," she replied automatically. Catherine smiled and continued in French. "Yesterday afternoon, I was at the corner cafe when I witnessed your conversations with several customers in different languages. I was impressed by your fluency. Robert and Margaret watched the exchange without understanding a word, but could tell from the body language that it was something important." "Thank you, ma'am. It was just a circumstantial situation," Samantha answered, still in French, trying to downplay it. "Circumstantial?" Catherine laughed. "My dear, I own a translation and interpretation company here in New York. In 20 years of experience, I've rarely seen someone switch between so many languages so effortlessly." Samantha's heart stopped. A translation company. Exactly the world she had tried to leave behind. "You're very kind, but I work here as a waitress. I'm happy with my current position." Catherine seemed surprised by the response, but undeterred. "May I speak with you privately? I have a proposal that might interest you." Samantha glanced nervously at Robert, who was clearly curious about what was being discussed. "Robert, the lady would like to speak with me. May I have a few minutes?" Of course. You can use my office." The two women headed to the back of the restaurant. Robert fidgeted, wondering what the elegant visitor wanted with his employee. In the office, Catherine got straight to the point. "Samantha, I don't know your background or previous experience, but what I saw yesterday convinced me you have extraordinary talent. I've worked in translation for 2 decades and am always looking for skilled professionals." Samantha felt as if the past was coming back to haunt her. "Mrs. Williams, I appreciate the offer, but as I said, I'm happy here." "You're happy waiting tables when you could be earning 10 times more using your language skills? Money isn't everything." Catherine studied her carefully. There was something in Samantha's reaction that didn't add up. Someone with her abilities should be excited about a professional opportunity, not running from it. "Samantha, may I be frank? Is something keeping you from working in translation?" The question hit a nerve. Samantha looked away. "It's nothing specific. I just prefer my life as it is." "Have you worked as a translator before?" Samantha's silence was more telling than any answer. "You have, haven't you?" Catherine pressed gently. "What happened?" "Ma'am, please, I don't mean to be rude, but this isn't something I wish to discuss." Catherine nodded, respecting the boundary Samantha had set, but her professional curiosity was piqued. In her experience, when someone with obvious talent avoided working in the field, there was usually a specific reason. "Very well, but I'll leave you my card. If you ever change your mind, reach out." She handed Samantha an elegant business card, which she reluctantly accepted. "And Samantha, just so you know, in the translation world, everyone deserves a second chance. Mistakes are part of the profession." Samantha's eyes snapped up. How had Catherine guessed it was a past mistake? "I have far more experience than I let on. I've seen many talents wasted over situations that could have been resolved," Catherine said with an understanding smile. "Think about my offer." When the two stepped out of the office, Robert was eager for details. "So? What was that about?" "The lady is a businesswoman and was interested in my language skills," Samantha replied vaguely. "What kind of business?" "Translation and interpretation." Robert felt a pang of panic. He had just discovered Samantha's worth, and now someone was trying to take her away. "And you? Are you interested?" "No. As I told her, I'm happy here." Robert sighed in relief, but Catherine, who was still nearby, caught the concern in his expression. "Mr. Miller, may I speak with you as well?" Robert nodded, and the three returned to the office. "Mr. Miller, I don't know if you realize the treasure you have on your team. Samantha has a talent that could turn your restaurant into the most sought-after spot for foreigners in New York." "I'm starting to see that," Robert admitted. "If I may make a suggestion, consider expanding your services. Offer themed nights from different countries, translated menus, even Portuguese classes for foreigners. With Samantha coordinating, it would be a guaranteed success." Robert listened carefully, but noticed Samantha growing increasingly uncomfortable. "These are interesting ideas, but we'd need to discuss them calmly." "Of course, but don't wait too long. Talents like Samantha's are rare." After Catherine left, Robert and Samantha were alone again. "Samantha, are you okay? You seem worried." "Robert, I need you to understand something. I don't want to go back to the world of translation. I chose to work here for a reason." "But why?" "That woman clearly recognizes your worth." "Because I don't want to be found out," she burst out. "Because the more people know about my skills, the higher the chance someone will dig into my past and discover what happened." Robert fell silent, finally grasping the depth of Samantha's fear. "The mistake you made, was it really that bad?" "It was enough to destroy 15 years of my career in a week," she said bitterly. "And it was enough to make me promise I'd never put myself in a position where one mistake could cause so much damage again. But Samantha, waiting tables isn't a permanent solution. You have a gift. My gift became my curse, Robert. The better I was, the more responsibility I was given. The more responsibility I had, the greater the fallout when I made a mistake." Robert began to understand this wasn't just professional for Samantha. It was deeply personal and emotional. What if there was a way to use your skills without taking big risks? Here at the restaurant, for example. "Last night I almost decided to leave," she confessed. "I thought about moving to another city, starting over somewhere no one knew me." The confession hit Robert like a bucket of cold water. The idea of losing Samantha, now that he'd discovered who she really was unacceptable. "Please don't do that. Give us a chance to find a solution." "What kind of solution?" "I don't know yet. But there must be a way for you to use your talents without exposing yourself to the risks you fear." Samantha looked at him skeptically. "Robert, you don't understand. The moment I started speaking other languages yesterday, I lost control of my own story. People will start asking questions, digging into who I am. It's only a matter of time before someone finds out what happened to me. And if they do, would it really be so terrible?" The question struck at the heart of Samantha's fear. Yes, it would be terrible. It would mean reliving the humiliation, the accusations, the loss of credibility. It would mean seeing the disappointment in people's eyes all over again when they learned of her mistake. "You wouldn't understand? You've never had your reputation completely destroyed." "Maybe not. But I do know what it's like to carry a burden, and I know sometimes it's worth taking risks for a better life." Samantha shook her head. "Robert, I appreciate your concern, but this is a decision only I can make." "All right. But before you make any drastic decisions, give me at least a week. A week to try something different here at the restaurant." "What kind of something different?" "Let me think about it some more, but promise you won't leave without talking to me first." Samantha hesitated but nodded. "1 week, but if I feel things are getting out of control, I'm leaving, and this time, I won't tell you where I'm going." Robert agreed, but deep down he was determined to find a way to convince Samantha to stay. Not just because she was valuable to the restaurant, but because he had begun to admire her in a way he couldn't fully explain. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Over the next few days, Robert watched Samantha carefully. He noticed how tense she became whenever a foreign customer entered the restaurant, as if she were wrestling with herself between helping and hiding. He also saw that she had started breaking plates frequently again, a clear sign she was nervous. On Wednesday, a situation tested Samantha's limits once more. A group of Japanese businessmen came in for a business meeting. They spoke only Japanese and basic English, and were clearly frustrated trying to place their orders. Robert looked at Samantha, who pretended not to notice. He approached her. "Sam, can you help?" "They can point at the menu," she replied, avoiding eye contact. "They're here for an important meeting. It would be a kindness." "Robert, we agreed I'd only help when absolutely necessary. And isn't it necessary now?" Samantha sighed and walked over to the Japanese businessmen. Within minutes, she had not only sorted out their orders, but was also helping them understand the menu options and even suggesting dishes that matched the professional tone they wanted to set. The businessmen were so impressed, they asked to speak to the manager. When Robert introduced himself, they praised the service effusively and asked if the restaurant offered translation services for corporate meetings. "Well," Robert hesitated, glancing at Samantha. "We don't offer that kind of service," she cut in quickly. "It was just a courtesy." But one of the Japanese men had already handed Robert his business card, saying in English that he'd like to hire translation services for future business meetings. After they left, Robert was elated. "Samantha, did you see that? They want to hire us for corporate meetings. We could open a whole new business line." "I don't want to get involved in corporate meetings," she said firmly. "But why? You were brilliant." "Because corporate meetings are exactly the kind of situation where mistakes can have serious consequences." Robert fell silent, remembering what Samantha had shared about her past. Corporate meetings, important contracts, serious consequences. It was likely in that exact environment that she had made the mistake that ruined her career. "I'm sorry. I didn't think about that." "It's fine. But now you understand why I'm hesitant to use my skills?" Robert nodded, but deep down, he still believed there was a way to help Samantha overcome her fears. That night, after the restaurant closed, Robert stayed alone in his office, thinking. He picked up the business card Catherine Williams had left and studied it carefully. Maybe she could help him understand Samantha's situation better. The next day, discreetly, Robert called Catherine. "Mrs. Williams? This is Robert from Southern Spice." "Oh, hello, Robert. How can I help you?" "I'd like to talk to you about Samantha." I have some questions. Of course. Can we meet this afternoon? They arranged to meet at a cafe near the restaurant. Robert told Samantha that he needed to handle some banking matters and would be out for a few hours. At the cafe, Catherine was curious about what Robert wanted to discuss. Robert, I noticed Samantha has some reservations about translation work. Does this have to do with past experiences? She told me she made a serious mistake years ago and lost her career because of it. She's afraid something similar might happen again. Catherine nodded understandingly. Unfortunately, that's not uncommon in our profession. One mistake in an important translation can indeed have serious consequences. Do you know of cases like that? A few. But Robert, I also know many professionals who manage to recover. The key is finding the right way to re-enter the market. How so? Well, it depends on the type of mistake and how the person handles it. Some mistakes are truly career-ending, while others can be overcome with time and reputation rebuilding. Robert fell silent, thinking. Mrs. Williams, would you be able to find out what happened to Samantha? Catherine looked at him in surprise. I could try to investigate, yes. The translation market is relatively small, and if it was significant, someone should remember. But why do you want to know? Because I want to help her. She's an amazing person wasting her talent out of fear. If I knew exactly what happened, maybe I could find a way to help her move past it. Robert, are you sure this is a good idea? If Samantha hasn't shared what happened, it might be because she's not ready to face it. Or maybe it's because she thinks no one would understand. If I show her I accept whatever happened, she might feel more comfortable talking about it. Catherine considered the request. All right, I'll make some discreet inquiries, but promise me you'll be careful with whatever I find. I promise. 2 days later, Catherine called Robert. I found out what happened to Samantha. Can we meet? They met again at the same cafe. Catherine looked serious. Robert, I uncovered Samantha's story. Her full name is Samantha Johnson Parker, and she did have a highly respected career in translation. What happened? 4 years ago, she was working as an interpreter for a crucial negotiation between an American company and a Chinese consortium. The contract was worth over $50 million. Robert felt his stomach tighten. During the negotiation, there was a misunderstanding about a specific clause. Samantha translated the words correctly, but didn't realize there was a critical cultural nuance that should have been explained. The American side misinterpreted the Chinese position and made a decision based on incomplete information. And then, the deal fell through. The American company lost not only that contract, but several related opportunities. There were layoffs, lawsuits. It was a disaster. Robert stayed quiet, beginning to grasp the magnitude of what had happened. But it wasn't her fault, was it? If she translated correctly? Technically, no. But in practice, an experienced interpreter should have caught the cultural nuance and flagged the misunderstanding. Samantha was hired precisely for her expertise in Sino-American negotiations. What happened afterward? The company publicly blamed her for the failed deal. They sued her for professional negligence. Though she won in court, her reputation was ruined. No one wanted to risk hiring her for major negotiations again. Robert felt a mix of sadness and admiration for Samantha. She'd carried this burden alone for 4 years. Is it possible for her to recover professionally? It's possible, yes, but it would be a long process. She'd have to start with smaller jobs, rebuild her reputation gradually, and most importantly, she'd have to overcome the psychological trauma of what happened. Psychological trauma? Robert, imagine finding out that your mistake, no matter how small, caused dozens of people to lose their jobs. That leaves a deep mark on a person. Robert thanked them for the information and returned to the restaurant with his mind full of thoughts. Now he understood why Samantha had chosen to hide. He understood why she preferred washing dishes as a waitress over risking another mistake with serious consequences. But he also understood she was wasting extraordinary talent out of fear. That night, after all the employees had left, Robert called Samantha to talk. Sam, I need to tell you something. She looked at him with suspense. I spoke with Catherine Williams and asked her to investigate what happened to you in the past. Samantha's face paled. You did what? I know about the negotiation with the Chinese. I know about the misunderstanding and the consequences. Samantha stood up from her chair, furious. How dare you investigate my life without my permission? Because I wanted to understand. You had no right, she shouted. This isn't any of your business. Samantha, please listen to me. No, you broke my trust. You did exactly what I was afraid would happen. Tears began streaming down her face. I trusted you when I told you I'd made a mistake. I trusted you to respect my boundaries. And you went behind my back to investigate. Robert realized he had made a grave mistake. Samantha, I'm sorry. I just wanted to help. Help? You want to help? Then leave me alone. Let me work as a waitress without trying to turn me into something I don't want to be anymore. But you're wasting... I'm not wasting anything. I'm protecting myself and the people around me. Do you know what happened when I made that mistake? 50 families lost their livelihoods, 50, because I missed a cultural nuance, but it wasn't entirely your fault. Yes, it was. I was the expert. I was the one who should have noticed, and I didn't. She was sobbing now. And now you want me to risk causing another disaster? Robert stepped closer, trying to comfort her. Sam, you're being too hard on yourself. Don't touch me. She stepped back. I'm leaving. Right now. And I don't want you trying to find me. Samantha, please. No, Robert. You've shown me I can't trust anyone. Not even you, who I thought had accepted me as I am. She took off her apron and threw it on the table. Today was my last day. Thank you for the 3 years of employment. Robert tried to follow her, but she ran out of the restaurant. He stood alone, realizing he had lost not just an extraordinary employee, but someone who had come to mean much more to him than he'd imagined. Samantha didn't return the next day or the day after. Robert tried calling her several times, but the phone always went straight to voicemail. Margaret and the other employees asked about her, but he didn't know what to say. On the third day, Margaret confronted him. Robert, what happened to Sam? She just disappeared. We had an argument. She decided to leave. What kind of argument? Sam never argued with anyone. Robert sighed, feeling the weight of guilt. I did something she considered a betrayal of her trust. What did you do? I investigated her past without permission. Margaret looked at him disapprovingly. Robert, how could you? Sam is a private person. If she didn't want to share something, you should have respected that. I know. I made a terrible mistake. And now? Are you just going to let her leave like that? What can I do? She made it clear she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. You can go after her and apologize sincerely. Admit you were wrong and promise to respect her boundaries. Robert considered the suggestion, but had no idea where to find Samantha. She'd changed her number and left no address. Then he remembered Catherine Williams. Maybe she could help. Catherine, I need your help again. What happened? I told Samantha I'd looked into her past. She was furious and left. Now I don't know how to find her. Robert, you did that even after I warned you to be careful? I thought if she knew I accepted what had happened. You didn't understand at all. It wasn't about her fearing your judgment. It was about her not being ready to face the past. So what now? How do I fix this? First, you need to accept that you might not be able to. Breaking the trust of someone who's already been betrayed is serious. But I have to try. Catherine was silent for a moment. Fine, I'll help you find her. But Robert, if we locate her, you'll do exactly as I say. No improvising, no explaining your intentions. Just a sincere apology. Robert agreed, desperate for a chance to make things right. Catherine used her contacts in the translators community to track Samantha down. She discovered Samantha had rented a small apartment in Queens and was working as a janitor at a shopping mall. A janitor? Robert couldn't hide his disbelief. Yes, probably chose a job where she wouldn't have to talk to many people. Robert's heart ached. Samantha had retreated even further, taking work that didn't even use her basic customer service skills. I'll go talk to her. No, you won't. She'll run the moment she sees you. Let me go first. Catherine went to the mall where Samantha worked and found her cleaning the third-floor restrooms. When Samantha saw her, her face showed surprise and resignation. "Mrs. Williams, how did you find me?" "Wasn't hard. Can we talk?" Samantha hesitated but nodded. They sat on a bench in the food court. "Robert is desperate to speak with you," Catherine said bluntly. "I don't want to talk to him. He knows he made a mistake. More than one. He broke my trust." "Samantha, may I give you advice from someone with more life experience?" She nodded reluctantly. "Sometimes people do wrong things for the right reasons. Robert looked into your past because he wanted to help, not hurt you. That doesn't excuse what he did." "It doesn't, but it explains, and it shows he cares more than you realize." Samantha stayed silent. "Samantha, you're working as a mall janitor. That's not protection, it's self-punishment. I'm working honestly and not causing trouble for anyone, and wasting your talents in a way that's almost criminal. My talents have caused enough problems already." Catherine sighed. "Samantha, may I tell you a story?" She nodded. 10 years ago, I had an interpreter working for me. Excellent professional, very experienced. During an international medical conference, she made a translation error that led to a misunderstanding about a treatment protocol. Samantha listened closely. Because of her mistake, a hospital adopted the wrong protocol, and 3 patients had complications. Thankfully, no one died, but it was serious. What happened to her? She did exactly what you're doing. She left the profession, refused to use her skills, started working jobs that required no responsibility. And then, 2 years later, during a medical emergency at a hospital, she was there as a relative's companion. A foreign patient arrived in critical condition, but no one could understand what he was trying to communicate about his condition. She refused to help, even though she knew she could save his life. Samantha felt a chill in her stomach. Did the patient survive? No, and she carries that guilt to this day, because she realized that hiding her talents can also have serious consequences. The silence between them was long and heavy. "What are you trying to tell me?" "That running from our gifts isn't the solution. The solution is learning to use them more wisely. But what if I make another mistake? You will, we all do. The question is whether the mistakes you could avoid by using your talents weigh more than the ones you might make." Samantha stayed quiet, processing Catherine's words. "Robert is waiting downstairs in the food court. He won't push if you don't want to talk to him, but I think you should at least hear what he has to say." Catherine stood up and began to walk away. "Samantha, you have an extraordinary gift. Wasting it won't bring back the people who lost their jobs because of that mistake, but using it wisely could make up for much of the harm you think you caused." After Catherine left, Samantha was alone with her thoughts. For the first time in years, she began to question whether hiding was truly the right thing. She went down to the food court and saw Robert sitting alone at a table, nervously fidgeting with his phone. He looked like he'd lost weight, with deep circles under his eyes. She approached hesitantly. "Robert." He looked up, and his face lit up when he saw her. "Samantha, you're willing to talk?" She sat across from him. 5 minutes. Say what you need to say." Robert took a deep breath. "First, I apologize. Truly, I invaded your privacy and broke your trust. There's no excuse for that." Samantha nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Second, I understand now why you chose to hide. I get the weight you carry, and I respect your decision to protect yourself and others." "Is that all?" "No. There's one more thing I need to say, even if it risks you never wanting to see me again." She waited. "I fell in love with you, Samantha. Not the woman who speaks 9 languages, but the dedicated waitress who always treated everyone with kindness, even when I treated you poorly. The woman who dropped plates because she was nervous but never stopped trying her best." Samantha felt her heart race. "Robert, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. And I wanted to say that no matter what happens between us, you'll always have a place at my restaurant, as a waitress if that's what you want. No pressure, no expectations about your other talents." Silence stretched between them. Samantha felt a whirlwind of emotions she'd buried for years. Why did you do it, Robert? Why dig into my past? Because I wanted to help you forgive yourself. Because I saw an extraordinary woman punishing herself for something that wasn't entirely her fault. But it was my fault. I was the expert. Samantha, you saved a Chinese woman the other day without a second thought. You helped French tourists, Japanese businessmen, families from all over. In every case, your skills made a positive difference. They were simple situations. And maybe that's what you need, simple situations where you can do good without the pressure of million-dollar contracts. Samantha considered his words. Robert, even if I forgive you, even if I go back to the restaurant, I can't be what you want me to be. I can't take on big responsibilities again. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking you to be yourself. The Samantha who cares about people and wants to help. What if I make another mistake? Then we'll make it together. I'll take responsibility as the owner. Samantha felt tears forming. Robert, you don't understand what you're offering. If something goes wrong, then we'll find a way to fix it together. The word together echoed in Samantha's mind. 4 years ago, she had carried all the blame alone. The idea of having someone by her side, sharing the responsibilities and consequences, was both terrifying and comforting. I need to think about it. How much time do you need? I don't know. Maybe a few weeks. Robert nodded. I'll wait, as long as it takes. He stood to leave, but she called out. Robert. Yes? Thank you for not giving up on me. He smiled for the first time in days. I'd never give up on you, Samantha. In the weeks that followed, Samantha kept working as a cleaner, but now her mind was full of doubts and possibilities. The words of Catherine and Robert echoed constantly in her thoughts. She began noticing small situations in the mall where her language skills could make a difference. Lost tourists, immigrants struggling to communicate with shopkeepers, moments when she could help, but chose to stay silent. One afternoon, she witnessed a scene that changed everything. A family of Syrian refugees was trying to explain to a pharmacy worker that they needed a specific medicine for their little girl, who had a high fever. The language barrier kept them from getting the right medication. Samantha watched for 10 minutes, debating whether to step in. The girl was crying, the parents were desperate, and the worker didn't know how to help. Finally, she couldn't stay still any longer. She approached the family and spoke in Arabic. Can I help you? The relief on the parents' faces was instant. They explained that the girl had taken a specific medicine in Syria and needed something similar but didn't know how to explain it. Samantha interpreted between the family and the pharmacist, who found the right medication. In 15 minutes, the situation was resolved and the family could give their daughter the medicine. Shukran, shukran, the father thanked her, holding Samantha's hands with gratitude. As the family walked away, Samantha realized she hadn't felt fear or anxiety during the translation, only the satisfaction of helping people in need. Maybe Catherine was right. Maybe hiding her talents did more harm than good. That night, she called Robert. Robert, it's Samantha. Samantha, how are you? I need to tell you something that happened today. She recounted the episode with the Syrian family. Robert listened quietly. How did you feel afterward? Good. Better than I felt in years, actually. And now, what do you think about my offer? I'm still scared, Robert, really scared. That's natural. But fear can't stop us from doing what's right. If I come back, it'll be slow. No big responsibilities at first. Of course, at your own pace. And you have to promise me one thing. Anything. If I decide it's too much, if I want to go back to just being a waitress, you'll respect that. I promise. Samantha took a deep breath. Then, can I come back on Monday? Robert smiled on the other end of the line. The restaurant's been waiting for you. On Monday morning, when Samantha walked into Southern Spice wearing her apron again, her co-workers greeted her with applause. Margaret hugged her with tears in her eyes. We missed you, Sam. The restaurant wasn't the same without you. Robert approached respectfully. Welcome back, Samantha. Thank you for having me back. This place was always yours. The first few days were quiet. Samantha returned to her routine as a waitress, serving tables with her usual kindness. Robert didn't pressure her to use her language skills, but when foreign customers appeared, she gradually began offering to help. First, just with simple things like explaining the menu. Later, with longer conversations about the city and tourist spots. Robert watched with admiration as Samantha slowly regained her confidence. He didn't comment on her progress, afraid of pressuring her. He simply offered silent support. 2 weeks after her return, Catherine Williams appeared at the restaurant again. "Samantha, how lovely to see you back." "Mrs. Williams, thank you for our conversation. It was enlightening." "I'm glad to hear that. How are you feeling?" "Better. Still nervous sometimes, but better." Catherine smiled. "Samantha, I have a proposal for you. Something small, no pressure." Robert stepped closer, curious. "What kind of proposal?" "I teach French to a group of ladies in the neighborhood. They'd love conversation practice with a native speaker. Just once a week, an hour in a relaxed setting." Samantha hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready to teach." It wouldn't be teaching, just chatting. About recipes, travel, culture, light topics. Robert noticed the interest in Samantha's eyes, but also her hesitation. "You can think about it. No need to decide now," he said. "Actually," Samantha surprised them both. "I think I'd like to try. But just conversation, nothing formal." Catherine beamed. "Perfect. We'll start next Thursday." When Catherine left, Robert approached Samantha. "Are you sure?" "No, but I think it's time to start being a little brave again." The first conversation class was a success. The group consisted of 5 women in their 60s and 70s learning French for a trip to France. They were delighted by Samantha's fluency and her patience in explaining language nuances. "Samantha, you should consider teaching regularly," one of them suggested. "You have a gift for it." On her way back to the restaurant, Samantha thought about the suggestion. Teaching was very different from interpreting in negotiations. It was a way to use her skills without the pressure of high stakes. "How did it go?" Robert asked when she arrived. "Better than I expected. They're very kind and genuinely interested in learning." "And how did you feel?" "Useful. I haven't felt useful like that in a long time." Robert smiled, seeing Samantha gradually finding her way back. As weeks passed, the conversation classes became a regular group. The ladies brought friends, and soon Samantha was leading 2 sessions a week. Robert adjusted the restaurant's schedule to accommodate her new activities. Then something unexpected happened. During one of her classes, a student brought her daughter-in-law, a university professor. "Samantha, my daughter-in-law works in the International Relations Department at Columbia University. She'd love to meet you." The professor, Jennifer Smith, introduced herself after class. "Samantha, I was impressed by your teaching approach. Would you consider working at the university?" The question caught Samantha completely off guard. "I don't have formal teaching experience, but you have something more valuable. Natural fluency and the ability to share knowledge in an accessible way. We need someone to lead conversation groups for our exchange students." Samantha felt her heart race. The university was the world she had left behind, a world of formalities and responsibilities. "Professor Smith, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm ready for this kind of work. Why don't you think about it? It would just be a few hours a week, small groups, an academic but relaxed environment." That night, Samantha talked to Robert about the offer. "What do you think?" "I think you should consider it. It's a chance to grow professionally without taking big risks." "But it's the university, Robert. It's a serious environment, with responsibilities. It's also a place of learning where mistakes are part of the process." Samantha considered his words. "What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do it? Then you come back here and keep teaching in the neighborhood. There's nothing to lose." After a week of reflection, Samantha decided to accept the university's offer. She would start with just one group once a week, leading French conversation sessions for American students preparing for study abroad. The first day at Columbia University was emotionally intense. Walking through the campus, Samantha remembered when she had been a student there, full of dreams and ambitions. Now she was returning differently, more cautious but also wiser. The group consisted of 12 enthusiastic students. The first class was dedicated to introductions and expectations. Samantha was surprised by the energy and curiosity of the young people. "Professor Samantha, have you ever worked in France?" one student asked. "I've worked with French people, but I've never lived in France. I learned the language through study and constant practice." "How did you become so fluent?" Samantha hesitated for a moment. It was a question that forced her to talk about her past, even if only briefly. "I worked for many years as a translator and interpreter. It requires constant practice and cultural immersion." "Do you still work as a translator?" The question she feared. Samantha took a deep breath. "Right now, I work at a restaurant and teach conversation classes. I changed careers a few years ago." The students didn't ask more about it, but Samantha realized she had managed to talk about her career transition without feeling excessive shame or discomfort. The university classes became a highlight of Samantha's week. The students were stimulating, the discussions were interesting, and she felt intellectually challenged in a way she hadn't experienced in years. After a month, Professor Smith approached her. "Samantha, the students love your classes. They say you have a unique approach, very practical and cultural." "I'm glad to hear that. I'd like to propose something else. We have a preparation program for students going on exchange to China. Would you be interested in leading some sessions on Sino-American intercultural communication?" Samantha felt a chill in her stomach. China. Exactly the context that had led to her biggest professional mistake. "Professor Smith, I have some reservations about working with Sino-American topics." "May I ask why?" Samantha knew the time had come to be more transparent about her past. "A few years ago, I made a serious mistake during an interpretation for a Sino-American negotiation. Since then, I've avoided working in that context." Smith looked at her with understanding. "Samantha, every professional in international relations has stories of mistakes and lessons. What matters is how we grow from them. But my mistake had very serious consequences, and I imagine you learned a lot from it. That doesn't make you less qualified. It makes you more aware of the challenges involved." Samantha fell silent, considering Smith's perspective. "It wouldn't be interpretation, it would be education. You would be preparing young people to avoid the kinds of misunderstandings that can happen in intercultural contexts. In fact, your experience, including the mistakes, makes you more qualified for this." The proposal deeply moved Samantha. On one hand, it was an opportunity to turn her negative experience into something constructive. On the other, it meant directly confronting the context of her greatest professional trauma. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Samantha, consider that maybe it's time to turn your pain into wisdom for others." That night, Samantha talked to Robert about the new proposal. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared, very scared, but also curious." "Curious?" "Yes. Curious to see if I could talk about Sino-American communication without panicking. If I could turn what I learned the hard way into something useful for other people." Robert studied her carefully. "And if you could, how would you feel? Like I'd closed a chapter, like I'd found a purpose for everything I went through." "Then I think you already have your answer." Samantha smiled slightly. "Maybe so, but I'll need your support." "You'll always have it, whatever you decide." A week later, Samantha agreed to lead the module on Sino-American intercultural communication. She decided she would be transparent with the students about her experiences, including the mistakes and lessons. During the first class of the module, she faced her biggest test since the incident that had changed her life. "My name is Samantha Johnson Parker, and I'll be talking to you about the challenges of intercultural communication between the US and China," she began, her voice slightly shaky. "I'll share not just successes, but also mistakes I've made, because I believe we learn more from our failures than our successes." The students listened intently, intrigued by her honest approach. 4 years ago, during an interpretation in an important negotiation, I made a mistake that led to serious consequences. Today I want to tell you exactly what happened and what I learned, so you can avoid similar pitfalls. For 2 hours, Samantha detailed the incident, explaining the cultural nuances she had missed, the assumptions she had made, and the consequences that followed. It was painful but also freeing. "Professor, how did you handle the aftermath?" asked a student. "Badly, very badly," she answered honestly. "I let the mistake define who I was, instead of letting it teach me who I could become." "And now? How do you feel talking about it?" Samantha paused for a moment to reflect. "It still hurts. It always will. But now I understand that hiding the pain doesn't heal it. Turning it into lessons for others, that has value." By the end of the class, the students applauded, not out of obligation, but out of genuine admiration for Samantha's courage and honesty. "Professor, thank you so much for sharing your experience," said one student. "This was the most valuable lesson we've ever had on intercultural communication." When Samantha left the university that day, she felt something she hadn't in 4 years: professional pride. Not the pride based on easy success, but the pride that comes from turning weakness into strength, trauma into teaching. She returned to the restaurant with a smile Robert hadn't seen in a long time. "How was it?" "Hard, painful, and extraordinary." "Tell me everything." As Samantha recounted the details of the class, Robert watched her with growing admiration. The woman in front of him had undergone a profound transformation. She was no longer the insecure waitress who dropped plates from nerves, nor the traumatized translator hiding from her past. She was someone new, an educator who had found her calling through adversity. "Samantha, I need to tell you something," said Robert when she finished speaking. "What?" "I'm proud of you. Very proud. Thank you, Robert. For everything. For giving me a safe place when I needed it. For helping me find courage when I thought I'd lost it forever. And I need to thank you for teaching me that sometimes the greatest kindness we can offer someone is believing in them when they don't believe in themselves." The two fell silent, recognizing that their relationship had evolved far beyond employer and employee. "Robert." "Yes?" "Remember when you said you fell in love with me?" He nodded, feeling his heart race. "How do you feel knowing the woman you fell for was just a hidden version of who I really am?" "Lucky," he answered without hesitation, "because I fell for your essence, not your skills. And now I have the privilege of knowing every facet of who you are." Samantha moved closer to him. "What if I told you I fell in love too, with the man who was kind enough to accept me without questions and brave enough to challenge me when I needed it?" Robert smiled, feeling as if the whole world had rearranged itself around him. "I'd say we're two fools who took too long to admit the obvious." They kissed right there, in the middle of the empty restaurant, as the sun set over New York. It was a kiss that sealed not just the beginning of a romance, but the conclusion of a long journey of healing and rediscovery. In the months that followed, Samantha's life transformed completely. She expanded her activities at the university, created an innovative intercultural training program, and began writing academic articles on international communication based on real-life experiences. The Southern Spice restaurant became a gathering spot for international students, who came not just for the food, but for the chance to practice English and learn about American culture from Samantha. Robert and Samantha married in a small but emotional ceremony held at the restaurant itself. The guests included staff, college students, the ladies from the French group, and Catherine Williams, who had become a close friend. "I never thought I'd see this day," Margaret confessed during the celebration. "Sam was so shy when she first arrived here." "She wasn't shy," Robert corrected. "She was healing. There's a difference." "And now?" Robert looked at Samantha, who was chatting animatedly in Mandarin with a pair of Chinese customers, effortlessly switching to English when others joined the conversation. "Now she's whole again." A year after the wedding, Samantha received a letter that changed everything once more. It was from a university in Beijing, inviting her to lead a seminar on Sino-American business communication. "It's ironic, isn't it?" she said to Robert, showing him the letter. "The place where I made my biggest mistake now, wants my expertise. Are you going to accept? I don't know, I still get a knot in my stomach when I think about working on high-level Sino-American negotiations. But that's not what they're asking. They want you to teach others how to avoid the mistakes you made. Samantha considered the offer. It was a chance to truly complete the cycle, returning to the context of her greatest trauma. But now, as an educator, not someone responsible for business outcomes. If I go, will you come with me? To China? Robert seemed surprised. Why not? You're always talking about expanding the restaurant's horizons. How about learning Chinese cuisine straight from the source? Robert smiled. Are you suggesting an educational honeymoon? I'm suggesting we face the place where it all began, together. For me, it would be a way to make peace with my past. For us, it would be an adventure. 2 months later, Robert and Samantha were in Beijing. The seminar was an extraordinary success, with over 200 participants, including American and Chinese business people, students, and diplomats. During her keynote presentation, Samantha shared her full story publicly for the first time. The audience was completely silent as she described the consequences of her mistake and how she had dealt with them. I've learned that competence isn't about never making mistakes, she concluded. Competence is taking responsibility for the mistakes we make and turning them into wisdom to prevent future errors. The applause was long and heartfelt. After the presentation, dozens of people approached to thank her for her honesty and ask for advice about their own professional missteps. Professor Samantha, said a Chinese businessman through an interpreter, I was at the negotiation where you made that mistake 4 years ago. Samantha felt her blood run cold. I wanted you to know we never blamed you personally. Negotiations are complex, misunderstandings happen, but seeing how you turned that experience into learning, that's truly impressive. Thank you, Samantha murmured, moved. And I'd like to extend an invitation. My company is starting a new joint venture with American partners. We'd like you to be our intercultural communication consultant. The offer represented far more than a professional opportunity. It was complete vindication, proof that she hadn't just overcome her mistake, but had grown because of it. I need to discuss this with my husband, Samantha said, glancing at Robert. Of course, but I hope you'll consider it. We believe no one is better qualified to help us avoid misunderstandings. That evening, in their Beijing hotel, Robert and Samantha talked over the offer. It's an incredible opportunity, Robert said. You'd be returning to the corporate world, but with a completely different perspective. But it would mean traveling a lot, taking on big responsibilities again. And do you feel ready for that? Samantha reflected on the question. 5 years ago, the idea of corporate responsibilities would have terrified her. Now, after all the healing and growth she'd gone through, she felt different. I think so, especially knowing you'll be with me. I always will be, in any adventure you choose. Then I think it's time to accept, but with one condition. What? I want to keep teaching at the university and leading my conversation groups. They remind me of where I came from and why I do what I do. Sounds perfect to me. Samantha accepted the consultancy, which grew into a thriving parallel career. She developed intercultural communication protocols adopted by dozens of companies, always grounded in real experiences and a deep understanding of how cultural misunderstandings could be avoided. The Southern Spice restaurant became a success story in multicultural business, often cited in articles about inclusive entrepreneurship. Robert expanded the menu to include dishes from various nationalities, always with Samantha's cultural guidance. 3 years after their wedding, Samantha discovered she was pregnant. The news brought immense joy, but also deep reflections about the future. How will we raise our child? She asked Robert. I want them to understand that mistakes are part of life, but also that we shouldn't be afraid to use our talents. We'll raise them with love, honesty, and the courage to be authentic, Robert replied, just like you taught me to be. When Daniel Miller Johnson was born, he was welcomed by a diverse community that included restaurant staff, college students, colleagues of various nationalities, and the ladies from the French group who insisted on being his adoptive grandmothers. What a lucky boy, remarked Margaret, holding Daniel in her arms. "He'll grow up hearing stories in 9 languages." 10, corrected Samantha. "I'm learning Korean for our new clients." Robert laughed. "Some things never change." "And others change completely," replied Samantha, looking around the crowded restaurant filled with people from different cultures, all connected in some way by the journey she had taken. End of story. Dear listeners, we've reached the end of this heartwarming tale of resilience and new beginnings. What did you think of Samantha's journey? Do you believe Robert made the right decisions? Share your honest thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories like this one.